A recent poll conducted by Yahoo News and YouGov shows less than half of Americans, 46%, believe candidates should commit in advance to accepting the results of this year's midterm elections. 55% say that once all the votes are counted, the candidate with the fewer votes should concede. Among Trump voters, that number falls to 44%. 38% of Trump voters say candidates with fewer votes should continue to challenge the results.
Let's bring in right now political strategist and pollster Frank Luntz. Hey, Frank, good to see you again. What's your takeaway from these numbers?
Scary as hell. I'm here at the Conservative Party conference. I'm trying to say to them, be very careful what you wish for. Be very careful what kind of campaign you hold, because you could end up like the U.S. When you lose the faith and trust in elections itself, you've lost your democracy. And we are so close to the edge. I'm sitting in this room right now with a group of students from Radley College, and I have to teach them, I have to explain to them that this isn't the way democracy is supposed to work, that you have winners and losers, you accept the loss, and then you move on. We are so poisoned, we are so toxic, and I don't want what's going on in the U.S. to happen here in the U.K. That would be a real tragedy.
You know, Frank, I look back through history and I think about the times where there are close races and where people that were tough partisan fighters said enough is enough. 1960, the Nixon campaign was sure, and a lot of neutral observers were sure, that there were some really bad dealings going on in Illinois. And maybe the Democrats, through the mob, through Sam Giancana in Chicago, had rigged the election. A lot of people went to Nixon and said, you've got to keep challenging the election. Nixon said, no, the election's over. Then you go fast forward 40 years. Al Gore. Al Gore, of course, had every reason to be concerned and to be quite bitter about a Supreme Court decision that broke against him based on what party had appointed justices to the Supreme Court. I think one of Al Gore's greatest moments was after that decision came out. He's like, okay, no. He told advisors, I'm not going to fight this anymore. The court has the final word. He went out, and I think he gave the most eloquent speech of his career. It looks like we lost him. Let's wait to get him back. Ralph, I think while we'll get Frank back.
That was such an important moment looking back. You realize how important
it really was. There was so much division. Al Gore came on, and I've got to say, he's a partisan Republican. I just sat there and had extraordinary respect for this man because it was clear he loved his country more than he loved power.
And he did it with a lot of people in the Democratic Party, including me, that didn't want him to do it at that time. But he showed the kind of maturity and the kind of really caring about the country more than he did his own political career. And clearly he had more reason to fight than what Donald Trump and others are trying to perpetrate now. And I think that that's the kind of statesmanship that you're missing from the right at this time, and that we have to resist from extremists on the left, because at the end of the day, you can win a battle, but you'll lose the war. And I think Gore said, no, we're not going to fight this battle. And I think history has vindicated him.
Yeah, that is for sure.
We're still trying to get Frank back. Yeah. Jonathan Lemire, of course, you look at these numbers, and you still have the majority of Americans saying at the end, once all the votes are counted, the one with the most votes wins, and that should be the case. But the margin's far narrower than we would have ever seen before Donald Trump.
Yeah, there's no question he accelerated this process. This is his doing. A campaign that I chart out in my book that began in 2016 and all the way didn't end on January 6th either, to undermine Americans' faith in their electoral system. And he's still doing it to this day. And we hear it repeated by fellow Republicans. And it has led to doubts in both parties who wonder that can they trust the election will be conducted fairly? Can they trust if a big lie candidate becomes a state secretary of state, will he or she certify the rightful winner in 2024? These are big, worrisome questions facing our democracy, and we have simply not had leaders from the Republican Party speak out and denounce this effort.
Yeah, I think we've got Frank back. Frank, comment on the contrast between Nixon in '60, Gore in 2000, and where we are today.
I actually believe that what happened with Gore in 2000 was the start of all of this. When there were about 1/3 of the Democrats who believed that George W. Bush was not their president, that he was not elected, despite the results in Florida. And the fact that 1/3, and they had some Democratic leaders actually saying this election is a fraud. The difference is that Nixon accepted the results and it brought people together. The results were not accepted in 2000. We've been going back and forth. I beg you all, don't turn this into a partisan issue. Republicans who keep saying that there's election fraud, there's tiny, tiny evidence and nothing substantial about election fraud across the country. It's the same thing with voter suppression. When people can vote day after day after day before the elections, they can vote on weekends, they can vote by mail, they can vote absentee. Every time we charge this with partisanship, we are destroying that faith and trust. It's already been destroyed in America. And I'm begging my students, don't do this, because you're not going to like the outcome if you do.
Political strategist and pollster Frank Luntz, thank you for being on this morning.